Okay, calm down.
Dennis Kucinich, and he's been on the show before. People know him and love him. He was the mayor of Cleveland from 1977 to 79. He served as a representative from Ohio's 10th congressional district from 1997 to 2013, during which time he introduced articles of impeachment against both President George W. Bush and Vice President Richard Cheney for lying to take the U.S. into war against Iraq. He ran for president in 2004 and 2008 and is now running as an independent for Ohio's 7th congressional district in 2024's race. So welcome, Dennis, Congressman Kucinich, Mayor Kucinich, presidential candidate Kucinich.
Katie, great to be with you. And I really appreciate this chance to have a discussion with you about what's going on right now.
Of course. So let's start off. Before we get into your campaign, I just wanted to kind of set the scene a little bit. Show a clip of Joe Biden from the first night of the DNC, because I think it really captures perhaps what you and I would think is wrong, one of the many things wrong with the Democrats. So let's take a look at this short clip of Joe Biden speaking at the DNC.
United Europe, like it had been united for years, adding Finland and Sweden to NATO. 10 days before he died, Henry Kissinger called and said, not since Napoleon has Europe not looked over their shoulder at Russia with dread until now. Until now. Well, guess what? Putin thought he'd take Kyiv in 3 days. 3 years later, Ukraine is still free.
And I'll just summarize in case that was hard to hear for anyone. I'm just going to summarize what was said. This is what Michael Tracy tweeted out when he tweeted out that clip. He tweeted out, the most insane moment of the night. Biden gets the crowd to tearfully cheer NATO expansion, quotes Henry Kissinger on his deathbed invoking Napoleon, then screams Ukraine is still free after 2+ years of nonstop escalating carnage and nuclear brinkmanship with no end in sight. So what are your thoughts on this comment and this kind of perspective on politics?
Well, first of all, it's always interesting to quote Napoleon, except that was hundreds of years ago. And it's important for us to be in the present because in this case, the past is not prologue. We have to consider that the United States foreign policy is what has led Ukraine into this conflict with Russia. And, I'm not for Russia invading Ukraine. Let's put that on the table right now. However, we have to realize that the United States engineered a coup in Ukraine in 2014. They knocked out a government that was actually standing up for the Ukrainian people, trying to work out a trade agreement in the European community that would have given Ukrainians workers access to be able to find jobs throughout Europe. And that was knocked down by the European community. And Ukraine was put at the mercy of the United States policies and encouraged to go ahead and attack the Donbass. And as a result, we now have seen Russia's response, over 600,000 Ukrainians, mostly young, the flower of the youth of the country, killed in combat in a war that should have been resolved a couple of years ago, but for Boris Johnson's meddling in a attempted peace agreement. So NATO is an anachronism that should have been disbanded years ago. It's outlived its usefulness. NATO has no purpose other than as an arms bazaar. And NATO's purpose right now is to keep growing and try to rattle the sabers with Russia. It can't possibly win in a war with Russia. Ukraine can't possibly win that war. All we can do is to see a grinding war with more dead Ukrainians, with the people in Ukraine suffering immensely, not having the food they need, destroying the breadbasket of Europe and in some cases the world that Ukraine represented. This war has been an immense tragedy for the Ukrainian people, and it must be ended, and it could have been ended. So President Biden's evoking that Ukraine is so free. Ukraine should always be free. Ukraine should have never been in a position where the idea of being in NATO was dangled, it was always best non-aligned. And so not aligned with Russia and not aligned with the West. That was a key and powerful position. So we go on to the speech and citing Henry Kissinger, whose realpolitik approach was very famous for America wielding military power, often in circumstances to the detriment of millions of people, the loss of lives in millions in Southeast Asia. We have moved away from those days of a unipolar world. We have a multipolar world. The Kissinger approach no longer works. And so for the president to evoke Henry Kissinger, God rest Henry Kissinger's soul, but also let his realpolitik approach be buried with him.
And what are your thoughts on the Democratic Party, and why are you running as an independent?
Yeah, well, the cheering for war is something that is anathema to me. I don't believe that war is inevitable. Peace is inevitable if you actually use diplomacy to work towards it. But that a diplomatic approach has been abandoned by the U.S. State Department. And under Anthony Blinken, what we've seen is continued saber rattling with a number of countries that we really don't want a war with, but the arms productions that go with saber rattling, the Cold War mentality that spreads. There's a point at which, we have to realize that we can't guarantee that a so-called Cold War approach isn't going to develop into a hot war. And we're certainly moving towards that in the Middle East. So, I'm running as an independent in a Republican district, by the way, is a +7 Republican district. When I was elected to Congress, I was able to defeat a Republican incumbent in a +4 Republican district because I focused on the economic issues. War is an economic issue today, by the way. $8 trillion of the $35 trillion deficit the United States has is due to wars since 9/11 that, we didn't have to fight, that were based on lies, that were really an opportunity to keep promoting the largesse of the military-industrial complex. Had nothing to do with the needs of the American people, has actually eroded the economic position of the American people. So as someone who opposes wars, I thought that it would be better for me to run as an independent, to be able to reach across the aisle, embrace my Democratic colleagues and Republican colleagues in the cause of peace, in the cause of cutting the deficit by eliminating the spending for war, in the cause of securing the border, the cause of stopping the spying that FISA has enabled to be writ large with the passage of the latest bill. I'm still me. My beliefs are the same, but I think that the party has strayed from the practical aspirations of the American people. And so I'm with the people.
And what is motivating the party? I mean, going back to what is motivating Biden's cheerleading for war and NATO, what is motivating the Democrats, the DNC and individual Democrats that is so antithetical to the interest of the people?
There are very few individuals in Congress who are challenging this group think about war. People in the Progressive Caucus wrote a letter trying to avoid further conflict with Russia over Ukraine, and they were slapped down for that.
They just were asking for diplomacy to be
Yeah.
part of it. They weren't even calling for an end to the war.
Well, there you have it. And so as a result, what we saw demonstrated is that there is a neoconservative, a philosophical mindset that has crept into Democratic policy without people really being aware that the party itself has been straitjacketed into an approach that keeps us at war. And I'm not for that. I have not harangued against the Democratic Party. When I was in Congress, I didn't attack Republicans. If I voted against the party leadership, I didn't attack the party. People can belong to whatever party they want. But for me, we have to end these wars before they end us. We have to find a way to explore this what I would call and what has been called the science of human relations. So we learn to settle our differences without violence. If we fail to do that and continue to think that arms are the way that we're going to settle everything, as President Kennedy said it years ago, if we can't live together like brothers and sisters, we'll perish together as fools. And we're right now in a time when the mindset of people in the party is to arm up, to spread these weapons around the world, and to use it in a kind of political approach, which is consistent with unipolarity, with the United States ruling the world, but it is totally inconsistent with protecting our Constitution, with protecting our budget, with a domestic agenda, with peace in our communities. So, I'm an independent candidate. I can work with everyone, but I'm not for war.